Hi, so this video is just an introduction to my public online colour course, Understanding and Applying Colour, that's presented by our National Art School here in Sydney, Australia. The course consists of 8 3-hour face-to-face live Zoom sessions with the option of practical exercises done outside of class. So I'd just like to go through the content of those 8 sessions and show just a sample of the slides from each of the sessions here. So session 1 looks at what is a colour, what exactly is colour a perception of, and then looks at the attributes of colour perception. In other words, the basic components of colour, starting with the most familiar ones of hue, lightness or value or tone, and chroma or colour strength, looking at how we can think of each of those as a dimension of a three-dimensional colour space, and think of things like the mixing paths of paints as paths through that sort of three-dimensional space. We also look in this session at different scales that are used to specify those dimensions, so different hue circles like the traditional colour wheel, the Munsell hue circle, NCS, and so on. So in session 1 we were primarily concerned with colours of objects. In session 2 we think also about colours of light and look at what we actually perceive when we see when we look at illuminated objects. This leads on to a discussion of colorimetry, and this might seem unusual in a course for painters, but these concepts from colorimetry or scientific color measurement keep coming up again and again in other topics in the rest of the course. So it's good to look at those, the basics of those concepts here, and also how they relate to the digital color spaces that digital painters use. In session 3 we look at the biology and physiology of color vision, getting down to the retina and cone cells and so on, and explain how color vision works at this end of the process. And this is something that's very widely misunderstood or poorly explained in popular explanations of color vision on YouTube and so on. We then look at the properties of artist paints, things like transparency, tinting strength, and so on. What different paints reflect and how that explains their color. In session 4 we look at the various physical mixing processes that are often rather misleadingly called color mixing. So we look at additive mixing, subtractive mixing, and additive averaging mixing. And then the mixing processes in actual paints. What happens when we mix a colored paint with a white paint, or a colored paint with a black paint, or with a gray paint? What happens when we mix different colored paints, and so on? And how we can use this understanding to get the exact paint mixture that we're after quickly and efficiently. Session 5 is our first session on colour and light. We look at what happens when objects reflect light. We look at what happens if we change various parameters like the direction light's coming from, the size of the light source, and so forth. And then we introduce a couple of new attributes of color: saturation, which is not the same as chroma, is a different thing, and brilliance. And these two concepts together are important for anyone interested in evoking in a painting effects of illumination and luminosity of being a light source. And we can see how these different dimensions relate to different digital color spaces. Session 6 is our second session on colour and light. We continue looking at the effect of changing other things about the setup, the number of light sources, effect of different materials, the effect of an intervening atmosphere, the effect of coloured illumination, and that includes how our visual system adapts to the colour of the illumination. In session 7, we look at the psychology of colour vision. This is the other end of the process to the rods and the cones. And an important aspect of that is this capacity for colour constancy that we have, the capacity to see an object as having a consistent colour despite variations in illumination and atmosphere and so forth. How this is an important capacity of our system for getting around in the world, but something that can create problems for us as painters. We then finish the session by looking at some what you might call failures of colour constancy. These are effects like simultaneous contrast and so forth, where the same object can appear different colours, also relevant to us as painters. Then we finish up with a session called Theories of Colour, where we look at the subject from a historical point of view and look at the development of our understanding of colour, both the science of colour and the applied science of colour in painting, starting with Leonardo and going through to Newton and through the 19th century to the present time. And we finish up by looking at this idea of traditional colour theory, that all colours are made of red, yellow and blue, and look at how that relates to our current understanding of colour. So particularly for students who are painters, we have practical exercises that can be done as homework and optionally for the other students as well. So we describe these at the end of each session. And then students who do the exercise during the week are welcome to send in photographs of what they've done, and we give feedback on those photographs in the first half hour of the next session. So these exercises progress from quite basic exercises illustrating the theory through to simple still life exercises looking at how to apply these concepts to a painting. Alright, so that's a quick run through the course, and there's the address of my webpage that describes the course in more detail. The classes are limited to 12 students, and the National Art School puts it on at quite a reasonable price of $405 Australian. In addition to the course, you get a complete set of the slides, more than 450 slides from the lecture course, and a mail out of a Munsell grayscale and a hue circle, as well as access to an online illustrated glossary of colour terms for reference. So there's a term coming up very, very soon, in a week or so you'd need to be very quick to enrol for that one that starts on August the 3rd. But there are also terms in 2 different time slots in term 4, starting in early October. And those are both already open, taking enrolments on the National Art School website. So you can enrol for those right now if you want to. All right, thanks for that, and hope this very quick run through was helps to at least explain a bit about the course. Thanks.